According to the account, Catherine knew something was wrong the moment Queen Camilla leaned toward Princess Charlotte and spoke in a tone no child could mistake. Charlotte did not cry or argue. She lowered her eyes, went quiet, and tried to make herself smaller. Catherine had spent years learning how to read a room, but this warning was written directly on her daughter's face. The gathering began like many royal weekends. It was spring. Windsor Castle was hosting a private luncheon linked to one of Camilla's charitable patronages, and several generations of the family were present. Everything looked polished, yet Charlotte had been unusually silent all morning, withdrawn as if the safest choice was to disappear into the background. That was not like her, and Catherine trusted the change she saw. That afternoon, Charlotte sat with the younger royal cousins in a side salon. The children were expected to behave, make polite conversation, and enjoy afternoon tea while the adults gathered in the main hall. Catherine helped Charlotte into her seat, kissed her forehead, and left. At first, nothing appeared wrong. About 45 minutes later, Catherine was speaking with a senior courtier when she saw Charlotte pass an open doorway. The child was not crying, but her face had gone pale and her mouth was pressed into a tight line. She looked emotionally wounded. Catherine ended the conversation and followed. She found Charlotte alone near a service door at the far end of the hallway, hands clasped and eyes fixed on the floor. Catherine crouched and asked what had happened. Charlotte first said nothing was wrong. Catherine gently told her she knew when something was bothering her. After a pause, Charlotte admitted that Granny Camilla had accused her of showing off and told her not to speak unless she was spoken to. Catherine asked when it happened. Charlotte explained that she had answered a question for Louis during a guessing game. She had not interrupted an adult or behaved rudely. She had simply known the answer. According to Charlotte, Camilla became annoyed. Catherine pulled her into a hug. On the outside, she remained calm. Inside, something shifted. For years, Catherine had tried to keep peace with Camilla, tolerating awkward remarks between adults. She had believed those moments would never be aimed at her children. Later, during a walk through the gardens, Catherine stayed close to Charlotte and watched Camilla ahead beside Charles. The problem was no longer only one remark. Charlotte had tried to hide it. A confident child was beginning to believe that speaking could bring embarrassment. After the garden tour, the family returned inside. At the refreshment table, Charlotte reached for a second scone. Camilla looked down and said with a half-smile that perhaps one was enough because they did not want to appear greedy. Taken alone, it could sound harmless. Beside the earlier warning, it formed a pattern. Charlotte was corrected when she spoke and when she ate. The message was clear. Be quieter. Take up less space. Catherine still did not make a scene. Her silence was deliberate. William had missed the earlier moments because he was discussing schedules with Charles and several senior aides. Catherine planned to tell him later at Adelaide Cottage. Before she could, another incident unfolded. After tea, the adults moved into a sitting room near the main gallery. The children were allowed to stay briefly before their nannies took them upstairs. Charlotte entered with George and Louis, sat near the fireplace and opened a book. Camilla arrived with a glass of water, laughing with a long-time aide. George and Louis soon moved toward their grandfather. Charlotte remained by the fire. She politely asked Camilla whether she could play the piano for a little while. Camilla repeated the word piano, as though the request were inconvenient. Charlotte promised to play quietly. Camilla told her it was not necessary, said the grown-ups deserved some peace, and suggested that Charlotte sit still like a proper young lady. The words were not shouted, but the tone was sharp. Charlotte's cheeks flushed. She closed the book, folded her hands, and became silent again. Catherine heard everything while speaking nearby with Lady Lansdowne. She looked from Charlotte to Camilla and held the stare longer than usual. Camilla noticed, then turned away. That evening at Adelaide Cottage, Catherine tucked Charlotte into bed. George was asleep, and William was finishing a call with his private secretary. Catherine sat beside Charlotte and asked whether she had felt upset. Charlotte said only a little and insisted she was fine. Catherine told her she did not have to pretend. Then Charlotte said the words Catherine could not ignore. Granny Camilla does not like it when I talk too much. Charlotte had already formed a conclusion. She believed the problem was not one moment. She believed her personality was unwelcome. Catherine kissed her forehead and left the room. William looked up from the study and asked whether Charlotte was all right. Catherine answered that she was trying to be. She then told William everything. She repeated Charlotte's words and described the guessing game, the warning about speaking the second scone, and the piano request. These were not isolated corrections. They were repeated attempts to make Charlotte quieter and less confident. William listened without interrupting. When Catherine finished, his jaw tightened. Catherine said they could not let it slide. William agreed, but said they needed to handle it carefully. The next morning, Catherine kept Charlotte home from a charity garden project arranged by Camilla for several royal grandchildren. The official reason was a minor cold. The real reason was that Catherine did not want Charlotte returned to the same space until she felt certain the child would be treated kindly. When Camilla learned Charlotte would not attend, she reportedly remarked that the girl was probably too delicate for a little mud. Catherine heard about that as well. Royal households often speak more than they admit. The tension might have remained private if another confrontation had not occurred the following weekend at Highgrove. Charles had invited William and Catherine to a small family dinner to reconnect and discuss upcoming royal tours. Catherine entered the main lounge with Charlotte, who had come only to greet her grandfather before bedtime. Camilla was seated near the fire. Charlotte smiled and said good evening. Camilla did not smile back. She asked whether Charlotte was sure she was not too tired to be there. Everyone heard it. This time Catherine did not wait until they returned home. She calmly asked Charlotte to say goodnight to her grandfather and go upstairs with Anna, the family nanny. Charlotte looked uncertain, but Catherine gave her a reassuring nod. Charlotte hugged Charles and left. The door closed. Camilla leaned back with her glass of wine and said Charlotte was very sensitive. William froze. Charles shifted uncomfortably. Catherine stepped forward. She did not raise her voice. She said Charlotte was not too sensitive. She was a child and deserved to be spoken to with kindness. Camilla said she had meant nothing by the question and had only been surprised. She suggested there was nothing worth becoming upset about. Catherine answered that it was not only about that night. The behavior had continued for weeks. She had heard what was being said, and Charlotte had heard every word. Charles tried to calm the room, but Catherine refused to let the issue be softened. One comment could have been dismissed. This was a pattern. She would not stand by while her daughter was made to feel less than anyone else. Camilla looked towards William, expecting him to intervene. He did not. Catherine said she had tried to preserve peace because royal life demanded it. She had ignored moments that felt wrong because public unity mattered. But this involved Charlotte. She would not allow anyone, regardless of rank, to damage the child's confidence. Camilla set down her glass and said Catherine was reading too much into ordinary remarks. Children, she said, were resilient. Catherine answered that children remember how they are spoken to, especially by those who are supposed to protect them. There was no shouting. The force came from her refusal to retreat. William finally spoke. He said they were asking for basic respect. Charlotte had done nothing wrong. She was simply being herself, and that should not be treated as a problem. Camilla looked at Charles, but he remained silent. Catherine had drawn a boundary. After several tense minutes, Catherine left the room. William followed soon afterward. Upstairs, Catherine sat beside Charlotte's bed and held her hand. She told her daughter she had done nothing wrong. She had been polite and kind, and that was all Catherine would ever ask. Charlotte said she had tried to be good. Catherine told her she did not have to be perfect. She only had to be herself. Later, back at Adelaide Cottage, Catherine told William that Camilla did not need to like her, but she would treat Charlotte with respect. That was not negotiable. William agreed. They would not allow it to continue. The following days were polite but different. At Charlotte's school recital at Lambrook, Catherine invited only immediate family. Camilla was not included. The palace called it a scheduling conflict, but the meaning was understood. Publicly, the family still presented unity. Behind palace walls, Catherine had changed the rules. Camilla kept more distance from Charlotte, and the obvious remarks stopped at least near Catherine. Still, the conflict was not fully settled. When the family gathered at Balmoral for the summer, Catherine arrived with clear boundaries. William and Catherine brought George, Charlotte, and Louis to Balmoral. before arriving. Catherine told William she would not leave Charlotte alone with Camilla, not even for a few minutes. Charles welcomed them warmly. Camilla arrived one day later with her usual entourage. Since the confrontation at Highgrove, she had not spoken privately with Catherine. Their contact had been limited to brief, formal exchanges. For the first few days, Balmoral was calm. The family took long walks, rode horses, and shared dinners. Charlotte slowly returned to herself. She talked at breakfast, ran through the fields with George and Louis, and helped a kitchen staff member bake scones. Then Catherine allowed her attention to move away from the children for more than 5 minutes. She was in the drawing room with Lady Sarah Chatto and several aides. William had gone fishing with Charles. The children were playing in the garden under the supervision of 2 staff members. A household aide approached Catherine and said Princess Charlotte was in the sunroom with Her Majesty. Catherine excused herself and walked quickly toward the room. Before entering, she heard Camilla telling Charlotte that people did not always need to speak over others, and that listening was important. Then, Camilla added that sometimes Charlotte's mother forgot that as well. Charlotte did not answer. Catherine opened the door. Camilla looked surprised. Catherine called Charlotte to her side, and the girl came directly to her. Camilla said she had only been having a word with Charlotte. Catherine replied that she had heard the conversation. When Camilla tried to continue, Catherine stopped her. Charlotte was only being a child. She did not need to be corrected every time she spoke. Camilla folded her arms and said she had raised children. She claimed she knew when a girl was growing too fast for her own good. Catherine answered that Charlotte was growing up perfectly well and would continue doing so without being made to feel like a problem. Again, there was no shouting. Catherine asked for more kindness around Charlotte and said that should not be too much to expect. Camilla did not reply. After leaving the room, Catherine knelt beside Charlotte in the hallway and told her she had done nothing wrong. Charlotte nodded, but her eyes were watery. Catherine told her she should never be afraid to speak. By the end of the week, palace staff noticed a change. Camilla sat farther from the children during meals. She stopped commenting on their behavior, clothing, voices, or manners. In the royal world, subtle changes carried large meaning. Catherine had not created a public scandal. She had not shouted or issued a statement. She had simply drawn a line that no one could miss. Even Charles, who had hoped the tension would fade, did not interfere again. He cared about both women, but he understood that Catherine had acted with reason and finality. The summer ended with the usual photographs. The family stood on the castle steps, smiled for the cameras, and waved to well-wishers. To the public, the image was one of unity. Inside the family, something had changed. Camilla had lost Catherine's willingness to tolerate hurtful moments for the sake of appearance. Catherine had decided that royal harmony could never be more important than Charlotte's confidence. The most powerful part of the account was not an explosion. It was the moment a mother stopped asking whether she was allowed to object. Catherine saw her daughter becoming smaller under repeated criticism, and she acted. Her message was direct. Charlotte would be polite. Charlotte would be kind. Charlotte would respect the people around her. But she would not be taught that silence was the price of belonging. In a family shaped by centuries of hierarchy, Catherine made one principle non-negotiable. No title tradition or public image would be allowed to make her daughter feel small again.